Whenever I witness a fight like that, or a boxing match, or a hockey game, I've noticed that I will react in a very visceral, highly imagined into the moment kind of way. I embody my engagement in the physical fight. I kind of will do this with I catch myself doing this or defending or something like that, like I'm twitching if I'm sitting in the basement by myself watching this stuff. And I've often wondered, why do I do that as a human being engaging in this battle? What in me makes me so readily and so deeply able to engage a battle? Part of me wonders, and I've been told, that it may be more of a guy thing than it is a girl thing, perhaps. Maybe men are really made for the fight, right from, the early Greeks when they would fight, a kind of predecessor fight to this kind of fighting, to somehow determine who the alpha male is, determine our mythical hero, define what a Superman looks like. Or maybe it's just a vestigial evolutionary thing where we've learned to naturally battle to protect ourselves and protect our families. If you look at the demographic, the primary demographic at UFC crowds, it is obvious that it is primarily XY chromosomal in nature. And if the response that a mother gave 2 weeks ago when we were talking about this upcoming sermon is any indication, she looked at me after I announced it and we were talking afterwards. She said, "Well, I can tell you one thing, John. I'm not going to be there. Neither are my two boys." But then her husband was standing behind her going, "I'll be there." I think it is, in many ways, a guy thing. But I think deep down, it's a human being thing. I remember sitting with a couple of seminary presidents in California about 5 years ago now, and we were talking about the ideas that have now been formed and are forming in our community, these seminal thoughts about God speaking through the Bible, and God also speaking through the rest of His creation, the natural world, but also human nature and the things that human beings do and create, things like sport. And we were talking about all of those things, and one of Richard Mao, the president of Fuller Theological Seminary, said, I get all of this and that God's truth is in those places, but one place where I've never really been able to come to terms with that idea has been boxing. I'm a huge boxing fan, he says, but where is God's truth? Where is God's goodness anywhere present in a sport where you're trying to concuss the other man? It's a big question, and one that I'm a bit of a keener. I wanted to answer it right there and then, but I didn't know what it was and thought about it for years. And then it came to me. The question, where is God's truth in a violent, combative sport? It came to me that maybe we're, as human beings, made at some level and to a great degree to engage in a life and death fight. To be human, perhaps, is to vigorously engage in a kind of mortal combat. The Apostle Paul's words came to mind from Ephesians 6. This is no afternoon athletic contest that we'll walk away from and forget about in a couple of hours. This walk of faith, this life of Christianity, is for keeps. A life or death fight to the finish against the devil and all of his angels. And then I started thinking of other biblical references to battling and fighting. In Hebrews, I read later this quote, "In this all-out match," and those words caught me, "this all-out match against sin and evil. Others have suffered far worse than you." And in the previous chapter, chapter 11 in Hebrews, the writer outlines what some of that battle was like. They were sawed in two. Some were murdered in cold blood. They were robbed and abused and whipped and chained in dungeons. And they were stoned. in the bad sense of the word. Well, they're both bad senses, but the literally throwing stones sense of the word. All that Old Testament violence. I read a psalm last week where the psalmist, open heart to God, is crying out and saying, "Up, God, my God, help me. Slap their faces." Get the image of that clip we showed you. Slap their faces, first this cheek, then the other, your fist hard in their teeth, God. And stories, like kids' stories that we grew up thinking, oh, what a great little kid's story, David and Goliath. A warrior gets a stone embedded into his forehead, and then the young teenage David goes over and cuts his head off. And that's your Sunday school lesson, kids. Go and do likewise. Think about Jesus fighting a fight to the death. All the blood. Think Mel Gibson's movie. All of the blood. A physical fight, a physical death, a physical victory. He was tortured, murdered, and inexplicably and clearly, he calls you and I to follow him. We're in a fight, a battle of faith, a full-on spiritual battle, a deeply intense life and death conflict. And I been wondering all the last month, is that part of what you made us for, God? What is enlivened when we engage a sport like mixed martial arts, as it's given to us in UFC? Do we all have this innate, all too human capacity to fight for our eternal lives? But you need to know something. You need to know that UFC will never ultimately get you there in terms of finding that place, that ultimate place, that vicarious thrill will always fall short. You will always need the next hit, the next fight, the next whatever to feed that addiction, to feel that glory, and to engage life at that intensity. It will not get you there. Only Christ can take us through that and has fought that fight, that ultimate fight. Only Christ has won that battle. And he won it bodily.